Okay? Psalms 137. Psalms 137. Yes, it is. This is a psalm written about the Jews in captivity. And in this psalm, it deals with three of the greatest emotions that we have. Verses 1 through 6 of Psalms 137 says this: By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. Now listen, the enemy used one of the traditions of the Jews against them as a way of rubbing it in their face, like, you can't do it in your own country anymore. You got to do it because you are slaves. And he says, and then verse 4 says, How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Let's read the rest of the psalm. Verse 7 says this: Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, Race it, race it. Race, that word res, means to destroy it, even to the foundation thereof. Basically, level the city. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall ye be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. One of the aspects of the Edomites that the Jews dealt with, and God used these foreign countries to invade the nation of Israel because they were doing wrong, and God would send preachers and messengers, and they would reject them. And then God would send these different other cultures to basically bring them into captivity, cause them to be slaves, and cause them to realize, hey, you had it pretty good when you were over in Israel, but now because you wouldn't listen, how do you like it now? And when we talked about the Edomites, one of the things that were known about the Edomites is they would take children, they'd take them by the feet, and they would bash the kids' heads against stones, just as a way of intimidation. That's just like in certain parts of the Roman Empire, when the Romans, when the Roman army would leave, they would literally leave, either have people crucified, like rows of people being crucified, or they would have places where they'd have heads sticking on poles. Just letting people know, hey, you come this way, you're heading for trouble. Just a form of intimidation. And yet, God allowed it because the children of Israel became so tone deaf to listen to the word of God and do what they're supposed to do. He finally says, I've had enough. You don't want to listen. You've hardened your heart. Because you hardened your heart, then we're going to have to do something to get your attention. Well, if we're not going to, but the book of Lamentation is tucked in between Jeremiah and Ezekiel, two of the major prophet books. And basically, Jeremiah writes the book of Lamentations, the 5 chapters of Lamentations, after for years he prayed, he preached, he begged, he pleaded for the nation of Israel to get right with God. Get away from their idols, turn to God, do what they're supposed to do, follow the commandments, love one another, and recognize the temple, and attend, and do all those things you're supposed to do. The nation of Israel got to the point that said, you know what? We don't want anything to do with it. We're going to do our own thing. Then Jeremiah, which is known as the weeping prophet, weeps as he sees his homeland being invaded. That's why he writes the book of Lamentations. He's lamenting. He's regretting for the nation of Israel what they have done and what has it come to that point. Now, there are many preachers I've heard in the past that if America doesn't get right with God and Christians don't get right with God, that there's a potential something like that could happen to America. We're already slipping down a different type of a slide to basically atheism and hedonism and those things that were basic other cultural behaviors. You have a falling away of believers, just a coldness of Christianity that is basically permeating and spreading throughout Christianity in America. Remember, I was talking to someone this week or last week talking about missionaries, mission sending countries, and at one time England was the mission sending country. Then you had from England it came to America. America for many years has been a mission sending country, leading the world in missionary sending. Now it is in Korea, South Korea, and in the Philippines. Those two countries are leading when it comes to missionaries being sent out, worldwide evangelism. They're being sent out from South Korea and the Philippines. Why? Because they're more receptive. And now there are missionaries from the Pacific, South Pacific, coming to America to preach to Americans. Why? Because America's gotten cold. And God will take it up to a certain point where he'll say, you know what? I've had enough. You made the choice. Now here's the consequences. He does it because he loves us. He does it because he wants us to get right. But in order to get right, sometimes we have to hurt. And unfortunately, that's what the nation of Israel did. They were hurting because they've been captive out of their own land, had been paraded through the desert into Babylon. And it's a very heathen country. When you think about, or kingdom, the Babylonian kingdom, can you think of anybody else in the Bible that were taken captive and brought into Babylon? One went into a lion's den, Daniel, and the 3 Hebrew children. They were taken captive from Israel and brought into Babylon. And now they went through a different aspect with them, that the Babylonians saw these young, intelligent, socially acceptable youth, said we can convert them and we can have them help us produce a better group of kids, a better group of people for future generations. So the Babylonians were very smart when it comes to that. So that's why they went after Daniel and the Hebrew children and that group of people. And so when you think about life's greatest emotions, what would you say would be the 3 greatest emotions that people deal with? Well, that's no. Huh? Worry. Okay. One would be crying. That's an emotion, isn't it? And we cry because of failure or disappointment. Secondly, is we sing. That's an emotion, yeah. When do we sing? A lot of times we're happy. We read there in Psalms 137 that they hung their harps. Why? Because there is no sweeter sound, as pure of a sound as to listen to someone playing on a harp. It's beautiful music, soothing. It's moving. It's beautiful music, and that's what David played, and that's what we're going to have when we get up to heaven. We're going to have harps. And so I won't be able to say all I can play is the radio up in heaven. I won't be able to do that anymore. But when we talk about another aspect of it is dreaming. Dreaming. And that's for the future. You ever just sat down, what it would be like for your future? What would it be like? We talk about having a vision. We have a dream. Maybe you started off having a specific desire and dream, and it didn't work out like you wanted to. It didn't mean that it was a bad dream. It just sometimes life happens and sort of shakes things up. But these are 3 emotions that's found in this Psalm of Psalm 137 to be able to express what they were dealing with. Now, can you imagine that the fact of homesickness? You're taken from your own culture, from your own family. You're taken from the people that you love and the city that you love. You're taken from that with the thought of you'll never see it again. and you're taken into a completely different culture with different philosophies, different beliefs, different actions, different responses. That would be fearful, I know that. And so when you think about that, so what would you do when you're fearful? Do you cry? Do you get mad? What do you do when you're fearful or when you're stressful? The nation of Israel shows us three different emotions and three different ways they dealt with being captives. First of all, now look at verse 1. It says this: by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Now, Zion is Jerusalem. They were remembering home. They were remembering. Now, if you've ever listened to true Jewish music, it's lively. I mean, you got the tambourines and you got the different instruments, and they're dancing, and they're clapping, and they're shouting. It's lively, wonderful music. That's part of their culture. They're remembering what it used to be like. It says we sat down and we remembered Zion. And so when you're dealing with the past, you deal with the fact of what if. Now look at Ezra chapter 3. Ezra chapter 3. I'll let you find it before the book of Job, before the book of Nehemiah, and after the book of 2 Chronicles. Ezra chapter 3. Verses 1 through 12 says this: and when the 7th month was come, and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered themselves together as one man to Jerusalem. Then stood up Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and his brethren the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his brethren, and builded the altar of the God of Israel, to offer burnt offerings thereon, as is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Now what has happened is this, is that the old temple was torn down. They've rebuilt the temple. And so the people have come to Jerusalem to recognize it and to dedicate it. They all came to Jerusalem. And they set the altar upon its base, for fear was upon them because the people of those countries, and they offered burnt offerings thereon unto the Lord, even burnt offerings, morning and evening. They kept also the Feast of Tabernacles, as is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings by number, according to the custom as the duty of every day required. So all of a sudden now they're reinstituting the culture. They're reinstituting the way they did it before. All this is rebuilding and correcting, and they're adjusting. And now understand, you've got older folks that remember the old temple, and you have the younger people that remember, that didn't have any idea what the old temple was like, and all of a sudden they see this new temple. And they're rebuilding it and getting it to where it needs to be again. Verse 5, Ezra chapter 3. And afterward offered the continual burnt offering, both of the new moons, of all the set feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, and of every one that willingly offered a freewill offering unto the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month began they to offer burnt offerings unto the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. They gave money also unto the masons, and to the carpenters, and meat, and drink, and oil, unto them of Zion, and to them of Tyre, to bring cedar trees from Lebanon to the sea of Japan, according to the grant that they had of Cyrus, king of Persia. Now, when we talk about the tithe, for a Jewish person, a tithe is just not 10%. You have 10% that you give of your overflow. You have 10% that is given towards the temple, and 3% that's given to satisfy when they had the feasts, to be able for the priests to be able to buy enough food and secure enough food, because when they had the feast, no one worked. So when you talk about the tithe in the Old Testament, it was 23% of their income. 23%. And so part of it was their job was to make sure that they gave to help the temple to get built. It's kind of like the Amish. If you want to see a group of people that work together, man, there are some unified people. I mean, I've seen them when they have a barn raising, a one-day barn raising. I mean, where they all come from? They just kind of like come from the hills are alive, and everybody they all gather together and everything, and they put all the wood down there, and then everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and boom, 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 boom. By the end of the day, you had a brand new, fully functioning barn. They worked together. And that was where, and just like the Jews, the Old Testament, everyone knew what they were supposed to do, and they all did their part, and they worked, and they sacrificed, and they gave to be able to make sure that they had the supplies needed to get the things done. And okay, then we were verse 8. Now in the second year of their coming unto the house of God at Jerusalem, so we're looking at the 7th month, the first year, to the second year. We're talking about a whole year plus a few months. In the second month began Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and the remnant of the brethren, the priests and the Levites, and all they that were come out of the captivity into Jerusalem, and appointed the Levites from 20 years old and upward to set forward the work of the house of the Lord. So these 20-year-olds, they were supposed to get things ready, so that this way when the temple was built, they'd have all the different furniture and everything ready to be able to get it set. So once everything was set, boom, get it there, and then you'd be able to fully function and fully worship the Lord. Then stood Jeshua with the sons and his brethren, Kadmiel and his sons, the sons of Judah, together to set forward the workmen in the house of God, the sons of Henadad, with their sons and their brethren, the Levites. And when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, they set the priests in their apparel with trumpets, the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord after the ordinance of David, king of Israel. And they sang together by course in praising and giving thanks unto the Lord, because he is good, for his mercy endureth forever toward Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. I mean, you talk about a praise fest. Can you imagine a whole town fully focusing on one thing, praising the Lord, singing and shouting, and what a wonderful time that was. But it says this in verse 12. But many of the priests and Levites and chief of the fathers, who were ancient men, we're talking about the older men, that had seen the first house, when the foundation of the house was laid before their eyes, wept with a loud voice, and many shouted aloud for joy. So the people could not discern the noise of the shout of joy from the noise of the weeping of the people, for the people shouted with a loud shout, and the noise was heard afar off. So you had the older folks weeping because they're thinking, well, it used to be this way. It's just not the same. The younger generation says, we have nothing to base our decisions on, and we're thankful for what we have. You see the conflict between the older people in the community, in the city, as well as the younger people. And so just like there's a conflict there's a conflict when the nation of Israel, they're in Babylon, and they understand that they're there because of the consequences of their behaviors and actions, but they don't want to be there. And they're weeping over the fact that they don't like the circumstances. And when you go back to Ezra and the building of the second temple, the older folks had a lot to think about, like the good old days. And, I think about, of course, I've been saved since 1979 and being involved in ministries. I heard Jack Van Impe preach a citywide revival back in 79, and that was amazing because I was a baby Christian, and going and seeing these men of God that were just the fundamentalists, that were the bastions of fundamentalism of the 70s, when the rise of fundamentalism, you had Jack Hyles and John R. Rice, and you had Bob Jones Sr., and you had other men of God that are preaching and doing great things, and Lester Roloff, and and other preachers, and I've heard all those. And those are some great times. But guess what? They're all gone. And if you go to those churches, it's not the same. Oh, they're still preaching. I know the pastor that followed after Jack Hyles, after Jack Hyles' son-in-law left the church, and then Pastor Wilkinson took over, doing a great thing. But he's not the same as Jack Hyles. And there was a struggle with the people thinking, we want to hear Jack Hyles. Well, Jack Hyles is dead. But they have a pastor, and they have growing ministries, and the college is going great, and all the Christian schools, everything's going great, but it's just not the same. There had to be a transition of, you can't live in the past. You got to learn to rejoice in what you have in the present. They wept. I wish things were different. What if we would have done something a little bit different? Maybe we wouldn't be in the same circumstance. I'm sure that the nation of Israel, these people had to be thinking, how could they have gotten themselves in it? We always have to get ourselves in a situation thinking, what if things would have been just a little bit different? What if I'd have made a different decision? What if I'd have said this? Maybe I'd have been this particular place. Maybe if I'd have not done this, we'd throw in all these what ifs. And really, we have no idea. You got to learn to live in the moments. They wept. He said they cried because they remembered their time with God. They remembered their failures. Let's go back to Psalms 137. Psalms 137. Psalms 137, then we're going to go to John chapter 11. It says this, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Now think about it, they're slaves. Do you think they just had a lot of free time to just hang out by the river? No. So it had to be a separate time when they got away from everybody to do that. To sit and look at what if. Maybe if we had just listened to that prophet, maybe if we'd have just gotten some things right and got rid of some things, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation. You can't live in the world of what if. You got to learn to live in right now. You got to learn to live in the moment, because sufficient unto the day, the Bible says, is the evil thereof. Can't beat yourself up with the past. Take the stick out of your hand and let God be God. Let him minister to you even in the darkest times. Now, let's look at some things about why Jesus may have wept out of John chapter 11. John chapter 11. Now, we know the most obvious one about why Jesus wept. John chapter 11. Let me get to it. We know the smallest verse in the Bible, it says, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. But maybe why did he weep? Maybe because of Mary's unbelief. Look at verse 21. Verse 21 says, then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Maybe it's because she doubted Jesus. Once again, it's what if. Maybe because, look at verse 37. Maybe because the multitudes failed to recognize Jesus' power. Verse 37 says this. And some of them said, could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, have caused that even this man should not have died? People doubted him. Well, if he could have done that then, why couldn't he have done this right now? Maybe that's what that sparked, or maybe hurt the Lord, was that the people that he came to love rejected him. And you see story after story after story about the people that he loved. He came unto his own received him not. Can you imagine the heartbreak? Time after time after time after time after time. But then also, go back to verse 5. Maybe because he wept just because of what we think about, is that he loved them. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Maybe it was more than just the fact that he died that Jesus wept. As we broaden our thoughts out, thinking maybe a little bit, we start looking at the different other things that are happening around the Lazarus' death, we start realizing that we see a failure of belief, a failure of trust in Jesus. They saw these miracles, and it just wasn't enough because it was not what they wanted. God's going to be God no matter what happens in this world. And although things may not go like we think they're supposed to go, God's not surprised by it all. And I'll say this, after Tuesday night, whatever happens, happens, and there's going to be one side's going to be all upset, the other side's going to be all happy. Guess what? God didn't say, oops, I didn't know that was going to happen. Because God puts up and God puts down. Whatever it is. And as people analyze everything, realize it's God that's working in the midst of everything to put people up and put people down. Do you know that Alexander the Great sat and wept because there's no more kingdoms to conquer? He lived for war and conquering people. He wept when there was no more countries to destroy. What a failed life. But that's how he lived it. So what makes us cry? But then also, we go back to Psalms 137, verses 2 and 3. Psalms 137, verses 2 and 3. It says this, we hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. The world mocks when we sing praises to God. And they think if they mock us, that they're getting something over us. I mean, I've had it where on the bus, I've had music on there, and I've had kids say, what are you listening to? I'm listening to Christian music. Oh, you listen to that? You're one of those Christians? What's one of those Christians? What's a those Christian? Well, what you are, I said, what am I? Describe what is a those Christian. Is it because I listen to something that's a little different than you? Is it because maybe I dress a little bit different than you? First of all, I told him, I said, I dress differently because I'm 62 years old. You're still in your bare teens. And I have a position of leadership, and you have a position of a child. But that's neither here nor there because I don't care. As long as you got clothes on, that doesn't matter to me. I mean, thank God for that, their clothes. I remember when I went to high school, the first week that I went to North Fort Myers Senior High School as a junior, we moved and we got there during homecoming week. The first day I walked on the high school campus, I'd come back from I went from a private Catholic male high school, very strict, into a public high school, bikini day. And guys wore their 1970s swimsuits. Next day was hug someone of the opposite sex. And it got worse the rest of the week. Now, as a teenager, I loved it. I was sort of shocked. But I was like, whoa. What have I been missing all these years? But that's the culture. That's just the way they wanted to act. And so when we look at the fact of singing is important because it lifts us up. I can't tell you that many times where I'll get in my car and I'll turn on, I'll flip on my phone, I'll get on Spotify, I'll listen to some music, and I'm singing away, and I've got my head swaying back and forth, and maybe my hands raised up or whatever, and I look at there and stoplight, people look like, are you crazy? I mean, just, but music, we are musical beings. And that's why there's so much controversy in the styles of music. Why? Because remember, who's the master musician who was in heaven? Satan was the master musician. That's why he uses so many different cultural types of music around the world to satisfy and direct people his way. And yet music is powerful. It used to drive us into crazy. We'd go into a grocery store, I'd go into a store, and then while she's shopping and I'm not annoying her, I'm listening to the music, and I'm literally singing the songs. She said, what song you sing? I tell her. How old are you when you listen? I said, I think I was about 10 years old. I said, how do you remember that? I said, it's just, we sang it all the time. And then she said, how do you do all that? I said, man, my life was about music. We get our 45s and we get our records, and we bring our record players outside, and we'd have full-blown concerts. We'd have everybody bringing the different types of music, especially during the summertime. And literally we just play music all day. We wear needles out all over the place. Because that was our lives, and it would lift us up and encourage us. That's why when you go to ball stadiums, they play certain music to get the crowd excited. Or if you go to like a funeral home, you don't have a exciting music at a funeral home, do you? It's very low and mellow. Why? Because you're trying to set the tone. You go to certain movies. I remember we'd go to certain movies when I was younger, and you have the get to a scary part, and they would play just certain types of music to get your mind to think something bad's going to happen, and kind of get you ready for some guy's going to pop out of a wall or something else like that. Or you would have, my grandmother used to like watching the older movies and had piano music, stuff like that. It would just, Grandma, how do you listen to that stuff? She said, man, it would just get everybody in the mood. We're musical beings. And just like God made good music, Satan has bad music. And yet Satan likes to be able to rub our music in our face as a mockery. No mockery if I'm singing about Jesus. I mean, there's sometimes I can hit the tune, sometimes I'm nowhere in the ballpark with the tunes. I've had kids saying, are you okay up there? Yeah, I'm fine. Why? I'm just singing. Oh, is that's called? Okay, yeah. It's okay. But just singing to the Lord. And that's what's happening right there, is that they were put the harps up there, the main musical instrument that they're allowed to bring, and they would play it, and the bad boy would say, hey, play me a tune. Play me some music. So this way I can continue to rub in your face that you're no longer home. You are my slave. And then lastly, look at verses 4 through 6. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, but prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Dreaming. I don't want to ever forget the beauty of Jerusalem, the seat where God Almighty, Jesus Christ, is going to sit. The very center of the religious worship is Jerusalem. And they're saying, we don't want to ever forget about that. And even though I may begin to forget about that, I'd much rather have all these bad things happen, because that place means that much to me. A dream. Dreams. Do you ever sit down and dream about what could be done? I had a friend of mine, and he said, I just want to let you know that God's touched my heart. I'm going to send some money, if that's okay, for your Christmas shoe boxes. Okay. You don't mind? Oh, no, we'll take it. We're Baptist preachers. We're about Baptist preacher. We'll take any money you want to give us. He said, I'm just hearing some great things. I said, let me tell you something. To see this many boxes, it excites God's people. Who would have thought we'd have 168 boxes up here? Never in a million years. That's a lot of boxes. But it's a vision. It's just dreaming what it'd be like to be able to have maybe a whole wall full of those things. Ruth is saying, no. Can I start 2 years early? But as a fact is that when you start dreaming, let God show you something big that you can do. I said, I just bragging on the church. I said, the church is moving forward on this. I'm thinking about moving to another project, and people say, no, we're not done with the shoe boxes yet. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'll hold off a little bit. The vision's still not set because God's people are still thinking about it. God's people are still participating in it. God's people are still praying about it. God's people are still providing for it. And as long as it's going, then the vision, the dream gets bigger. And then we finally come on the 17th and we have how many boxes we have up here. And we'll look back and say, wow, that was a whole lot bigger than we ever thought we'd ever have. That's why I never set a goal. Never set a goal because I never know what we're going to do. Because I said, I want 200 shoe boxes and we only have 50, people will be discouraged. Plus, not sure how the Lord's going to work all that out. Okay, God, we're going to do this. You hold off, either direct us, fund us, or give us direction. And the Lord does. Every year, God has given us a different amount of money, a different amount of boxes. There's no failures in that. It's just that what God wanted us to do that particular year. And there's no shame in saying, well, we only did 75 boxes. Only? There's some churches don't do that much. So you can't ever minimize what God can give you the vision to do. God's still a good God. He's still a big God. And he is so big, he wants to show his bigness to us. We've just got to open up our heart and start exercising that little mustard seed so God can say, you know what, let me show you what that little mustard seed is going to do in your life. But you put a whole bunch of mustard seeds together, you have a container. Just do what you can, the dreams, the plans. God's not done yet. God's not done yet. And so when you talk about crying, then the singing, but then also that don't ever lose the vision while you do what you do. It's all about Jesus Christ. It's all about one day leaving this old wicked world. All the pain and suffering and agitation, the hypocrisies and the frustrations and what they say one time, they flip around and tell you something different. And you say, well, you said this. I didn't say this. I said this. And just all kinds of animosity, stuff like that. Is that's all going to be gone. All the health issues and all the pain and the misery of missing loved ones and thinking how much longer, seeing what's going on around society, thinking how much longer this society is going to be left for it implodes. We're going to leave this old world and we're going to walk on the streets of gold. We're going to have a glorified body. And we're going to see our loved ones. We're going to see our friends. We're going to see the men and women, the boys and girls that through our giving, through our prayers, supporting missionaries, doing whatever it is, we're going to see them in heaven. And then we'll be brought before the presence of Jesus Christ. We'll be able to see the nail prints in his hands and see the place they put the spear in his side. And we'll be able to look at him and bow down, calling him he is worthy. And Lord will say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. What an honorable time that's going to be. The more I think about that, makes me long for that place up there and want to get rid of this whole place right here. But it's not time yet. I can still long for it. I can still dream about it. But I've got to also live my life right here. And yes, we're going to cry. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. But then don't lose your song. Don't lose the joy of the Lord, which is your strength. That's what Psalms 37 is all about. No matter how bad it is, God is bigger than that. don't lose what God has done for you. We serve a good God, don't we? Okay?